I could hear Lady Gaga in my head. I took a bus, another bus, BART, and then another bus to make sure I made it to UC Berkeley's campus for a special event hosted by Dr. Kellie McEhlaney and her team. Allison Felix, the most decorated Olympian in track and field history in this country, she and her brother answered questions from an adoring crowd after the premiere of their movie about Allison's personal and professional journey. My guest today is Dr. Kellie, though. She is a professor, an author, a founder, and a woman doing the work. Let's get into the conversation. You founded the Center for Equity, Gender, and Leadership in 2017, yes. one year after Colin Kaepernick took a knee and the rest of the world woke up to the way that Black people use the word woke, and then they all lost their collective minds over wokeness. And I imagine in establishing the center, you were confronted with ideas about wokeness and this isn't necessary. Talk to me a little bit about what it was like those years ago, establishing the center at that time and what you were confronting.
Yeah. And I'm full license to be transparent here. First of all, I just taught the Colin Kaepernick case last week in my undergraduate leadership and personal brand class. It's always inspiring to hear the students and their deep amount of just awe for him. This year was a little weird because I realized how young they are. Some of them they kind of vaguely knew the details, but they were like, well, I was in middle school then. And I have these moments of, wow, I'm old, they're young, but it's okay. I'm teaching them. And just their collective respect and awe of what Colin did. And now what can they learn from him and the way, he handled all of that, but just the activism that his movement sparked. So, but back to your question, I founded the center in 2017, and I will be, again, really honest with you. I started it with my own narrow vision as a white woman. I've been a part of benefiting from DEI, benefiting from feminism my entire life. So I have learned a lot in the past 7 years, a very compressed but fast, I would say, PhD course on what I have not done for Black women, what I could be doing better for Black women, women of color, period, for the LGBTQ community, for the trans community. 2017 was, it was also in the heart of #MeToo. So in a way, everything just came together to make this the obvious thing to do. Much easier times to do the work. My center now is really on the cusp of instability, if not over the cusp of instability, because we've lost all of our corporate partners at this stage. So we're resting solely on the philanthropic giving of individuals. So it's an interesting time in general, depressingly so, I should say, in terms of DEI. But I'm also just really proud of what we've been able to do at a place like Berkeley. Again, to the full transparency, there were folks who also called me out and said, you're a white woman. What do you know about DEI? Why are you leading this center as a white woman? You don't deserve to be here. And here's going to be an interesting thing. My Black girlfriends were the ones who held me up during that time and said, get over your white imposter syndrome. You've been doing the work. You're doing the work. You deserve to be here. And the irony of my Black girlfriends telling me to get over my imposter syndrome was not lost on me. I mean, thank God I have such a diverse circle of friends. My personal board of directors is extraordinarily diverse. The people that catch me when I falter and thought, I don't deserve to be here. I shouldn't be doing this work. And they're like, you're doing the work. Keep doing the work. Let all that stuff go. This is not serving you. This is not serving the world. And I'll be honest, it was often not Black people who told me I didn't deserve to be there. More often than not, it was the neoliberal white person who felt like they needed to be the voice for the Black community. So it was all very complicated. But I am doing the work. And it's just, the work in women's sports is just, I think it's wide open right now. There's just so much work that can be done. And hopefully we're not on the national radar screen in this moment the way other things are. So hopefully we can use, as often is the case, we can use sports to be a unifier, to be a lever for change.
I definitely want to dive into that. I want to go back a bit to what your Black girlfriends were telling you. In the summer of 2020, when George Floyd was murdered and people were taking to the streets, I grew up in South San Jose. I'm used to being the only. A lot of my girlfriends from childhood that I still have today are white women. And a lot of them were coming to me saying, what can I do? What can I do? And I'm like, I'm exhausted. I don't know what to tell you to do because there's nothing that I can say. And I'm sure a lot of Black women felt like this all over the country. I don't know what to say to convince you of our humanity. You all have to talk to each other. For the generation of white people in general who grew up under desegregation, who went to school with different minorities, people of color, LGBTQ, if you all have lived this experience and you came out all right, like nothing happened to you. You didn't lose your rights. We didn't enslave you. We didn't change laws. Like we were now just neighbors, teammates.
Right.
And you are still voting against our collective. I don't know what to say to you. So I'm so glad that you have diversified your friend group who can tell you the truth. Like they probably felt like, I don't know what to say. One, you're qualified. But it will take people who look like you, who sound like you, who are experienced and educated to somehow convince those who aren't standing up in their power, using their privilege to better all of us. The collective. That's the thing. It's like, right. It's like, it's not just to give us something. It's to also give you something.
Rising tides raise all boats, and we will, benefit. There's a great saying, and I won't claim this. Rosalind Hudnell, she's a former executive from Intel, and she's on my personal board of directors, and she's a Black woman. And she always said something that really stuck to me. She said, Kelly, you can't lead a diverse team in the corporate world if you don't lead a diverse life. And I think, I'm so fortunate, and it's been intentional, but I'm so fortunate. I learn far more from my diverse set of professional and personal friends than I do from all the academic journals, period. So I don't even, I really now just study life through my human circle rather than the thousands of academic journals that are here in my
life is the greatest teacher, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well,
in establishing the center, there were, I will say this, it says this on the site, we develop leaders who positively impact the global corporate landscape by providing them with programs, tools, and resources to be strategically purpose-driven. Now, going back in time again, what were some KPIs for you? How are you going to look at this and say, like, this is how we're being successful? This is when we know we're doing the work in the right way.
It's a really good question. I mean, I work for a public institution, so one KPI is always, do we have money coming in the door to support this work? And we did. We were so fortunate early on to just have donors coming to us to say, how can I support you? What can we do? Just seeing, seeing men show up in the classroom was a great KPI for me. I will remember a former student of mine, Brandon Dahl, and he went on to work for the at the time, Oakland Raiders, then Las Vegas Raiders, which is super hard to say. He showed up in the first course I taught. Now, the first course I taught in this space is pretty horrifyingly, was titled "The Business Case for Investing in Women." So goes to show you what I didn't know at that time. Why would I name a course that? Because nobody has ever, in my 40 years of history in higher ed, asked me to develop a course that's the business case for investing in white men. So I kind of look back at that moment, but I was where I was, and that's what I called the class. And Brandon showed up in class the first day, and, white guy, was Navy SEAL. He fast forward, took the class. We just became super close. We were close friends, but he called me one day when he was with the Oakland Raiders, and he's like, I just had the weirdest experience. The chief marketing officer recognized me in the hallway, said, hi, I hear you're the new feminist that we just hired. That was a fabulous KPI to see, our students really creating change. And he went on to do great things at the Raiders and continues to do so. And he's a huge supporter of our women in sports. But really just to see our students succeed, and not just succeed by rising up the ladder, but by pushing back on systems. I had a former student who took her company to court for some bias and won. And it took a huge toll on her, as it does, to be constantly fighting the system. But she called one day. I didn't know any of this. And I don't want to name her because it's not my story. But she said, I remember sitting in your class and hearing that I have to hold the door open for women behind me. And sometimes that means kicking the door down or busting the glass. And those, it's a lot about stories, but really seeing the success of our women and men who did the hard work and now are leading DEI, have couple of students who started ERGs inside of their companies. And it might sound small, but when you get out, particularly undergrads, when you get out of undergrad and you go work for a company like Apple, it's a pretty big deal to start an ERG for first in family. So again, it's not just about gender, it's about all aspects of equity. And these two students at Apple banded together and started an ERG for first in family, because if you're first in family to go to college, it stands to reason you're first in family to enter the corporate world. And how woefully underprepared they were. And they just didn't want other kids who had their lived experience to go it alone.
Yeah, that's the thing about employee resource groups, those ERGs. They weren't just Black, white. They were women, they were Latino, they were LGBT, they were veterans, they're parents, they're differently abled. And but there was a particular reason why it was focused in a particular way when discussed.
Yeah.
But I love to hear the success stories, because I do feel like it is those everyday actions that get people motivated, and they have a foundation set by an organization and a center like yours. They got the tools, and now you got to go out and do it. And it really does come from the people on the ground doing the work.
And the tools really, I mean, Olivia, the work I do is called DEI, and it is absolutely DEI, but it's actually just leadership. It's actually just good leadership, period. So when I think about the student stories that I'm telling you, I really just taught them leadership, and taught them that they do have voice, they do have power, and that they can use them. And really, most change starts with somebody grabbing their voice and using it. And then collective moves along with it. So if you have power, be the first person in that room to use it to create positive change, and others will come with you. But
others will come.
That's what my students really talked about last week with Colin. They really got into this. Like, can you imagine how frightened he must have been to be the first one to kneel down and take his knee? The empathy that they had. And again, I do a lot of work around empathy, because if you really tap into your empathy, you cannot not be a change agent when you see what's happening in this world. You just can't.
You just can't. Oh, gosh. I'm like, this is a lot heavier of a conversation than I was prepared for. Like, when I'm like, I'm going to talk to Kelly. She's so exciting. But like, as much as, again, we want to do work that is meaningful, that puts people in a place where they feel like they can use their voice, use their experience.
Yeah.
It's also living in that space where sometimes you're knocked down a peg and you've got to get lifted up again. I'm going to go back in time a little bit more. We talked about 2017. You had a TED Talk from 14 years ago. I don't know why I said it so aggressively. 14 years ago.
To show my...
We both look fantastic. Moisturizing, sunscreen.
Olive oil and wine. That's my secret. Stick with it.
You said this. You said this in your TED Talk.
How do I define CSR? I am not a do-gooder. I'm a hardcore capitalist. I'm an ex-banker. You should have picked that up in my intro. I look at CSR as it is a business strategy, not throwing money off at a cause and then turning around and making money by any method possible. I look at it as it is a business strategy, which means it has to be linked to two things: protecting wealth for the company or creating wealth for the company.
Looking at all these companies who poured so much money into diversifying their workforce, creating products that demonstrated what we thought were their values. There are now over 300,000 Black women who are unemployed. Yeah. There are people who are scrubbing their websites and their social media of all of the things that they invested in at that time. I wonder, how are you feeling at this point, thinking about the business case and the reality that it can go away so quickly? Like the frustrations you may have, or the new strategies that you are employing, and telling other companies to not give up the fight because of potential backlash. That was like 50 questions in one, Kelly. But let's start with how you're feeling about this change.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm prone to depression, so this is just going to be something that I own. I have to find hope. I have to find moments of hope. Otherwise, I would be so flattened. And I have really. It's been a hell of a last 10 years. And I'm white again, so I'm speaking from a position of privilege, but I have to find moments of hope. So I do a lot of corporate consulting on my own. And I'm blessed to know corporate leaders who are still doing the work, who are still bringing me in to do the work, but they just aren't talking about it publicly. They've just taken it off their website because they do have federal contracts and grants. And if those go away, the company goes away and the DEI work goes away. So I am somebody who believes I don't get super caught up on what people call it. For a while, or depending on the audience, I call it impact leadership. Because again, that I work in a business school and our core competency is developing leaders. So I really have to keep it contextualized around that. And to be honest, I think that's where it should have always lived. It should have always lived in creating high impact leaders, effective leaders. The news is bad, but there are definitely glimmers of hope. Time is gonna, we're gonna be on the right side of history at some stage. But for sure, and I don't want to minimize the amount of companies who put up the black box on their Instagram for Black Lives Matter. They have to put their head on their pillow every night, and I can guarantee you a lot of them aren't sleeping well. They might still be making money, but I just don't. I believe in the fundamental goodness of humans, and I believe that they're suffering. And if they aren't feeling the suffering, their body's feeling it. It's karma. Karma's am I allowed to swear?
You can say whatever you want.
Karma's a bitch. And sometimes that's what helps me get through the day, is just knowing. But I do want to be hopeful. I do work with countless companies who are still doing the work. They're just doing it differently or more quietly.
We talked a bit about, or you mentioned, I should say, sports. And I talk on the show all the time about sports feeling like the last industry that still is demonstrably embracing DEI, demonstrably embracing diversity, asking people of diverse backgrounds to show up, to be fans, to put on whatever color, to have Black night, women's night, LGBT, whatever that reality is, come one, come all. And thinking about this next chapter, or I don't know if you call it a next chapter, an addendum, an addition to everything else that you're doing. You recently started the Leadership Academy of Women's Sports. And I imagine that is where a lot of your hope lies in sports. And I read a post that you put on LinkedIn a few months ago. And this is what you said. It was in 2025. No, maybe it was the beginning of 2026. It has been a year of pivot. Some linked to DEI backlash. Honestly, more is linked to grabbing the courage to follow through with an idea that came to me at my dad's funeral. This is what he built me to do.
Yeah.
Creating the center. I want you to describe for me how you go from this idea to the inevitable. I would imagine it feels like, oh, of course, this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
But going from the idea to where it is now, what was that path like for you?
Well, you can see the tears. I'm glad I'm wearing thick glasses because it's still very raw and emotional. And I've got his awards on my neck when he died. He was a collegiate football player at Duke, which is hard for me to say because I went to UNC. But he was my role model, the best leadership coach I could have ever possibly asked for. And he did build me to be much braver than I think I sometimes realize that I am. And so what was it like? It was honestly, when I got these, when parents die or relatives die, you inherit things and you put them in a box because you can't really look at them for a while. And I had to put all this Duke paraphernalia in a box because I can't possibly show up in any Duke paraphernalia. But I remember going into this jeweler that I use, who's really awesome, and asking him to put some of these on a chain. And then I wear them, Olivia, and I literally just feel his presence and his strength. And I want to carry his torch. I mean, he was one of the authors of Title IX. He hired the first openly gay assistant athletic director, female. Never forget her. Just an amazing human, Peggy Pruitt. I don't even remember my students' names from last semester, but I will never forget Peggy Pruitt because she was fierce. She had a huge impact on me, probably because I was quite young, the first gay woman I ever met. Not that I knew she was gay. I just thought she was fierce. Like this woman was just unabashedly who she was. So I think the fear is just that, I'm not a former athlete. In fact, don't broadcast this, but I know you will. And it's kind of funny. I was a cheerleader. Don't tell anybody. I'd lose my feminist card.
No, feminism is about you can do whatever you want, Kelly.
It's true. And logically, at the time, I couldn't play football. And so being a cheerleader in my little mind, 8th grade was the fastest way to get close to the football field, which is really what I thought would make my dad proud, at least I'm on the field, Dad. But it was definitely scary because, again, let's go right back to women. I felt like an imposter. I felt like, well, my dad did all this. My sister's an Ironman triathlete. She's a beast. She's the athlete in the family. I was always the cheerleader in the family. So I had to go right back and get over that imposter syndrome. But I also, there's such a there. And I just brought it right back to leadership. Like, for whatever blessing or fortune, God, my dad, put me on this earth as a teacher of leadership. And so it's no different with women in sports. I just happen to be far more passionate about female sports. Like, I turned the game on last night, the men's game, and I realized it's the first men's basketball game I watched all season, because all of my time has been in watching women's sports. And it's just, it's more inspiring for me to watch women's sports. And listen, I'm still in the thick of it. I still don't have a sustainable funding path to continue to do this work. We were really lucky to get 2 sponsors in who really sponsored our first academy. We want to run 2 academies a year. And so I feel like I'm single again. I have made more asks over the last 6 months and gotten more no's. It feels like I'm back out on the dating scene, which was a horrific time. But I remember my dad saying, hey, Kel, every no is one step closer to a yes. I literally hear sound bites from him in my, as I'm out there trying to do this work.
I want to get into the details of the cohort, though. Yeah. Like, I understand the next thing is you are in a position where you've got to get this swimming. And so you're treading water right now, inviting people on to the next cohort. But let's talk about the first one. What was, talk to me about the highlights, the takeaways, the women that were in the space, how it felt.
It was probably one of the best experiences I've had in the past 20 years of my career. I don't want to negate other experiences. I've had a great career, and I hope that I continue to have a great career now that I'm pivoting into this space. But from the minute we launched the program, publicly, we had over 100 applications. The participants were fully sponsored. So we were limited in terms of how many participants we could accept. So we had over 100 applicants for 35 slots. We ended up taking 42. Our center, Berkeley Executive Ed, worked with us to be able to take more participants in. But it was just this amazing, I can't even tell you the energy. And that was on our online Zoom. So we had our orientation, was just an hour on Zoom. And just mind-blowing walking away from that, just the energy that was just, I don't know, just exploding off my screen. But the people, we had 1 man, and the rest were people who identified as female. I want to read you a quote because I thought this was brilliant. So we just got all of the KPIs, to use your language, back. We walked out after the 3 days feeling just exuberant, but that's subjective. And as an academic, you're taught to really, doesn't matter how you feel. What's the data say?
What's the data? Yes.
Which I think was BS, because it does matter how you feel. But I thought that the past 3 days have been nothing short of transformative. This academy was a rare experience that balanced intellectual challenge with deep personal connection. And I think, we have brilliant professors. Every professor, knocked it out of the park, also came to me on the side and says, this was the most fun program I've ever taught in. Like, they all commented on the energy in the room. But when we were doing our research to put this together, we really learned that the academic content is critical. And we have that down. Like, we're the #1 public institution. I knew that my fellow faculty would perform, but the access to the networks was also a really important, that was sort of, women tend to not have access to the same networks that men do. So we really wanted to do everything we could to do 2 things: to invite participants into the experience, not the academic part, but in our networking events at night, who could advance these individuals' careers. You know what I mean? Who could sponsor, not just mentor, but sponsor. We also wanted, and we did that, and it was fantastic. And we have one individual who already met an angel investor in the company that they're creating. So that was really, like, those are KPIs that matter. But the stickiness of the cohort, we also wanted to make sure that the cohort was really, that they cared about each other. And we had to kick them out at night. Like, we started at 8 a.m. with the classes, and then we had events each of the 2 nights that they were here. We had to kick them out of the room at 9, at 9 p.m. They don't want to leave each other. We just really bonded as a group. Fast forward, we have a WhatsApp group. It's explosive every day, and not just with our brackets, because of course we had to have a bracket. But with, hey, I just got, I got pinged for this job. I'm not interested, but here it is. Who's interested? Hey, I'm looking for investors. Hey, will you be on my podcast? There's another individual who hosts a podcast. Hey, I need some tips around dealing with bullying on the field in my youth sports program. And people just jumping to support. We had this I think is super badass. We had a female race car driver in the program, and she had a race up in Sonoma 2 weeks ago, and a huge group of participants went up there for her race. I was traveling, so I couldn't go, but just that camaraderie, but not just as friends. I really want to emphasize, Olivia, how can I help advance you? Here are some ways that I can help support you, and also being brave and asking for support, which often women aren't very good at doing. We're really watching that unfold.
In 2008, you published Just Good Business, the strategic guide to aligning corporate responsibility and brand. And you had 7 principles that you kind of outlined that brands should do to authentically incorporate good brand business and have alignment. And I want to walk through those 7 things, because I think there are a lot of brands that are doing this really well and for women's sports, but I want to get your thoughts on it. The 7 principles: authentic connection, strategic alignment, senior leadership commitment, integration into governance, targeted business objectives, measurable impact, and effective communication. Again, there is a ton of money being thrown at women's sports. Some of it's good, some of it's bad, some of it's strategic, some of it's thoughtful.
Right.
But thinking about the landscape of it all, I wonder your feelings on thinking about those principles. And again, all the money that's out there and available. How do you think women's sports leagues, teams are handling this influx?
It's a little new, right? Because these brands are all, clawing their way in. But what I find about women's sports and women leaders is they're much more intentional. So I do feel like forget the brands, because they're not always intentionally doing it for good. They want a piece of the action. But I do feel like the sports teams and leagues are being very intentional about being selective about their brand partners. You think about Sephora and Kaiser and Sutter Health with the Valkyries. I think those are very intentional partnerships, and I've been really impressed. Again, it's early days, right? Because these teams and leagues have had to beg for support for so long, and now they finally get to. And I'm going to put me in there too, because eventually we'll have brands coming and begging to get involved in our. Yes. But I think we now have the opportunity and the option to be intentional, because we do have the support coming at us. But I've been pretty impressed. I don't know a lot of the teams and leagues intimately, but I know what I see at Valkyries, and I know what I'm watching with Love Volleyball and Bay FC, and I know the leaders in those spaces. I mean, Jess Smith is probably one of the most brilliantly intentional brand gurus that I've ever met. Like, just I really think she is focused on authentic brand partnerships.
Yeah, I feel like this is an opportunity for the teams and leagues to be stingy.
Yeah,
it's
absolutely.
Before it was begging, and now you're in a place where like the broader community really enjoys the way we play, enjoys the environment, enjoys our fans. And if you have to feel lucky to be a part of this movement 100%. Versus looking for handouts. And that's what makes, I think, it exciting this time.
And I don't remember the exact statistic, but the brand loyalty that is coming from the brands who are supporting women's sports. I mean, talk about a business case, that's slam dunk right there. No pun intended, but that's just an open and shut case, because they're getting fan brand loyalty far more than any sporting event for men. And so that's going to force intentionality right there, because those brands owe the Valkyries right now. I mean, look at the activation of people switching brands and supporting those brands because they're supporting the Valkyries. So I think it's a really great opportunity.
That's why I think it's so wild, Kelly. Like, we can see that, again, like those DEI efforts, the diversity efforts, the inclusion efforts are profitable. And we knew that 10 years ago. Right. Those companies are making the biggest profits in the world, and a number of them have shut their door because of, fear of blah, blah, blah. But the money case, the business case, makes sense. And I like I said, I think women's sports are in a unique position right now to be picky, to be choosy, and like they deserve it at this point.
Really appreciate, honestly, the injection of hope that you've just given me, because I need it. And we have to hold each other up during these times.
And thank you again for watching this on YouTube, listening on Spotify, following along on Instagram and Blue Sky. Until next time.